Oh, hello.
Hi, Sarah. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Hope all is well in Geneva and in Nairobi and where everybody is.
Great to see you.
So Sarah, I assume the COP was a really nice event.
Did you follow? Were you there in person?
No, I was following you on Twitter.
Oh, okay. Great. That's another way to stay engaged, I guess. It's very useful. I find it useful, especially these big events.
Yeah, no, and I'm guessing that the COP will factor into your remarks. So I'm looking forward to hearing your remarks.
Yes, of course. Yeah, it's my presentation. We are live already, as far as I can see.
Oh, are we? Okay.
Yes, you are live. Just few moments, few seconds. We are just trying to check that everything works. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Shanti. Good to see you.
Hi, Sarah. Hi, Amos and Emil. I think we met once
Yeah.
in a meeting.
We were on a few calls, but nice to see you
Yes.
again.
Good to see you, Amos. And Phoebe too. Hi.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Phoebe, thank you.
Yes, so we just want to make sure everybody's on board, then we can start.
Hello, everybody. Nice to meet you. This is Chris.
Hi, Chris.
Hello, Chris.
So I just want to make a check that we are all here. So Sarah is here, I can see. Shanti is here. I guess then Emil Sheraton. Are you here?
Present.
Okay, thank you very much. Then we have Yoni Yonkabi. Is it also here?
Yeah, present. Just switching on my camera shortly.
Okay, if I'm not calling your names correct, please apologies for that. All right. I don't know if my camera is working correct because here I'm not seeing myself properly.
Yes, you look like Invisible Man.
Invisible? Oh.
I think it's the background that does some.
Okay, let me check that. Let me try to do that. Let me check my background. Choose background. And, because why is it showing?
Amos, you can remove the background picture.
I can remove it, eh? But if I remove it, it's not okay. It's just because of where I am. Just 1 second.
I think, Amos, let's just start.
Okay, I think it's much better now.
It is
hope.
better. Yes.
Okay, thanks to technology. We call it technology climate. It's also something that is that we have to all adjust with. It's constantly changing, and we all need to try our best to get to know about it. So just to introduce myself first, so I'm going to be the moderator for this session. I'm very humbled to have such a top panelist, and I hope that everyone who is watching us now is going to enjoy this particular section, especially the fact that it is in a way coinciding with the COP26 discussion, which is currently rolling up. So I am Professor Amos Kaboba from the University of Energy and Natural Resources. And I've been working in around Geo for quite some time now. In fact, in 2017, I hosted the AfriGEO Symposium in Ghana. So I'm particularly really motivated to see, first of all, to emphasize that right now the AfriGEO is not in Geneva, but is right here in our soils to nurture it. And I'm happy to see all of you joining this particular session. So by way of a quick introduction, I'm just going to introduce each of you briefly. But I know that maybe during your presentations, if there are certain things I may have missed, it is also important to highlight that. So I want to start with Sarah Venturini. I hope that is correct. I think I personally know Sarah from within Geo as a climate scientist. So Sarah is the coordinator at the Group on Earth Observation Secretariat. So she brings in a lot of expertise from the UNFCCC, and she has been working in the Caribbean, Indian Ocean, quite a lot of experience from around the world, Asia and in Europe. So we hope to hear from you what you have from us and how best you can further strengthen our meeting today. Then we have Emil Sheraton, is a research scientist.
Phoebe, did we lose Amos?
Looks like it.
Anesthesia.
You're muted, Amos.
So, Shanti, we have met with through the Geoscience Australia. He's been assisting with the Digital Earth Africa, which is another now an initiative. So we expect to hear a lot about how Digital Earth Africa can further strengthen the work we are doing in AfriGEO, because we think in Africa that is one of the initiatives that will further strengthen and sustain existing works that has already been carried out. Then we also have Yoni Yokabi is a climate specialist with several years of experience implementing several climate change projects in Kenya. She's won quite a number of grants and stuff on the area of climate change. So we do wish to also hear from her as she goes through the section. Have I left anybody out?
Amos, we lost you in between,
Yes.
so your introductions, we only heard the first one and mine, only two of them you've introduced, I think. Emil, myself, and Sarah. Could you please introduce other panels as well? We only heard, yeah, we lost you in between.
Oh, sorry for that. So I have introduced Sarah, I have introduced Shanti, I've introduced Emil. Then I'm yet to introduce Chris. So Chris is director of the Climate Hazard Center. So and he's a director at the University of California, US. So he has also worked with quite a lot of work. He's done quite a lot of work, especially on the FuseNet initiative. So he hopes to bring his expertise from all these areas to bear. Then we have Yomi. Did I introduce you? The climate scientist from Kenya. Did it come through clear?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
All right. Then
it's Yvonne, yes.
Okay, all right, Yvonne, all right. Then we have Moni Gilben from South Africa. Is he here with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay, yes. Thank you very much for joining. He's a lead scientist also from the South African Weather Service, also bringing to mind a critical component, because weather and climate and agriculture, food security are all key issues that needs to be addressed. So I'm happy to have such a wide, varied, diverse panel for this particular afternoon section. So now I just try to, I think all of you may have received the protocols on which we will be presenting, because this is all online, and we really wish that this could have been in person so that we can further interact. But unfortunately, COVID is not allowing us to have such an issue, such a case. So what is going to happen is that each of you is going to give 15 minutes presentation, or if you also have a talk, so you are allowed to talk 15 minutes. But as you are talking, please try to ensure that your video is on, because this is also recorded so that people from around the world later on or even now can watch. And what is going to happen is that there is also going to be a time for questions and reflections. So as we go through it, Okay, I'm just informed that it's not 15 minutes, it's 5 minutes. Okay, it's 5 minutes rather. So it means that if you have a presentation, it has to be just 5 minutes. So I think, and then after that, we can start with the discussions. So that also gives us more time for the discussions, because I personally feel it's the discussions that will bring the partnerships, that will bring the synergy that we need to ensure that at the end of the day, we can be coming out with outcomes that we can really implement in Africa to ensure that the climate issues are well established. So on that note, I will call on Sarah to start. Sarah, may you start, please?
Yes, I will share my screen.
Okay, thank you
for
very
the
much.
presentation and do my best to keep under
Just do your best.
10 minutes. Yes.
Just do your best. That's okay. Yeah.
Okay. So good day, everyone, again, and thanks for having me at this AfriGEO Symposium to open the session. You've already heard who I am from Amos. I work at the Geo Secretariat in Geneva, Switzerland, where I lead the work on climate action and engagement with geo governments and partners, and I liaise with geo activities in the work program to link them up to policymakers, essentially. In order to make use of Earth observations for climate action, we really need to have a clear idea of the value and the role of GEO in this domain. And that's the purpose of the Geo Climate Change Working Group, which was established in 2020. This is a group of about 100 experts in GEO that works across the GEO work program, as well as with UN official bodies and conventions, and promote action on climate mitigation, adaptation, and loss and damage. So I stole this image from the UNFCCC Secretariat, just to say that Earth observations are embedded in the funding articles of the UN Convention on Climate Change, which is the framework and UN body tasked with supporting the global response to climate change, under which the Paris Agreement was adopted in 2015. If you look at this from a value chain perspective, GEO really sits at the interface between observation and services and applications. And ultimately, it is helping governments access and use Earth observation data to strengthen climate policy. In practice, we as GEO both have the mandate for and the access to Earth observation data from public and private providers. And we are developing applications and trusted knowledge products that integrate Earth observation into other policy mandates to support climate action with statistical, economic, demographic, and other social data. And this is, of course, done in collaboration with and for a diverse range of users, including regional and national decision makers and local communities. And one of the key set of actions of the Climate Change Working Group really relates to the engagement with the UNFCCC. And we work with subsidiary bodies of the convention, as well as with WMO, CEOs, the space agencies, and other partners to prepare to participate actively in the conferences of the parties known as COP. I just returned from Glasgow, where I and other colleagues participated in COP26, which is the 26th conference of the parties. We organized a number of events to promote the work of GEO and attended the negotiations as well. And you must have heard that there are divergent views on whether the summit was a success or a failure politically. But nevertheless, there were some good technical outcomes that don't make the headlines, but are important for our community. In particular, I'm pleased to report that at COP26, a lot of progress was made under the agenda item on research and systematic observation. That is where the contribution of science and our community is discussed. And the final text of this technical piece of negotiations really acknowledges the work of GEO with regard to the importance of cooperation, building partnerships at the national and regional level, and to understand climate change and address gaps in ocean, land, and ice observations. And this reference in the negotiations will really help drive our work in the next years. This is the roadmap for all our climate action activities. And these include, most notably, well, the Geo Climate Workshop we had in September, our participation at COP26 in November, and Geo Week 2021, which is happening next week, where we will have several dedicated sessions on climate. And also, I should mention that next year we are planning to have more work focused at the regional level. And the next COP27, will be hosted by Egypt in November 2022, and it will be an African COP. So the priorities will be defined by the Egypt presidency, and we plan to be there, of course. So our Geo Climate Policy and Finance Workshop was held in September. This was the second workshop of this kind for Geo, and the Climate Change Working Group was tasked with following up on the outcomes of the first Geo Climate Workshop that was held in Geneva in 2018. And at this link, you can find all the recordings and the workshop materials if you're interested. The theme of the 2021 Geo Climate Workshop was Earth Observation for Climate Ambition, based on recommendations from the Geo plenary in Canberra in 2019. The event included 2 days dedicated to climate policy and 1 day focused on climate finance and how Earth observation can support these. And the mandate was really to host an event that would involve a broader policy audience than just the geotechnical expert and community. And these are some of the stakeholders involved. Overall, we had 57 speakers and 35 presentations from the broader geo community, and over 300 participants joined us over the 3 days, including a good share from Africa. And we heard regional perspectives from least developed countries and small island states, among others, and many of the Geo World Program activities showcased their ongoing efforts, including Digital Earth Africa and others who are here today, to produce Earth observation data and information that respond to critical country needs in sectors such as agriculture, forests, water, and extreme weather events. So the full workshop report is being finalized and will be shared at Geo Week next week. But in summary, really the workshop brought clarity on the unique contribution and Geo's role, especially with regard to the support to climate adaptation. This process to seek a Geo mandate under the UNFCCC to deliver on adaptation has been initiated with the reference in the outcomes of the technical negotiations that I mentioned earlier at COP26, and we will be pursuing this further next year. Also, the Secretariat launched a new dedicated Geo Climate Finance workstream for 2022 to involve the Geo community in opportunities to apply Earth observation as a critical tool to unlock public finance for climate projects in developing countries funded by the Green Climate Fund, for instance, and other public funds, as well as opportunities to use Earth observation to support private investment decisions on asset level management and risk assessment by corporates and banks, pension funds, and insurance companies. And finally, the workshop was an occasion to strengthen or build partnerships with geo partners and potentially new associates. And of course, I wanted to highlight that under the Geo umbrella, we work with the indigenous peoples and local communities through the Geoindigenous Alliance, which was funded by indigenous representatives in the 2019 Geo-Ministerial Summit in Canberra. And among the funders, there's Titus Letapo, a member of the Samburu tribe in Kenya. And the Alliance really supports innovation in Earth observation data, science, and technology that is led by and co-designed with indigenous peoples for climate action, food security, etc. And finally, this is my last slide. I wanted to highlight that at COP26, we also launched the outcome of a novel collaboration between government space agencies and commercial satellite companies, which was brokered by Geo Climate Race and the World Geospatial Industry Council. This report, Greenhouse Gas Monitoring from Space, is the first joint comprehensive effort by public and private sector to map the current and upcoming satellite missions that are meant to detect and measure greenhouse gas for the use of policymakers within the UNFCCC. And you can download it also from the Geo website. So this concludes my overview of the Geo activities relevant for climate, but there's much more. And thanks for listening. I'll be here to answer any questions. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for the very nice insight that you have given us. I think one important take from that is that AfriGEO will need to further prepare adequately for next year, COP27. It will be right here in our soil, so we need to think about how we can plan, how we can team up. And the issues of the consideration of the indigenous communities, the indigenous knowledge is also something that is very key for us to really ensure that we are not leaving them out in all these our discussions. Really, thank you for your input. Now I go to the next person. Can I now, Dr. Emil Sheraton, may you share your talk on this?
Yes, thank you so much, Amos, Professor Kababa. And thank you, of course, to the AfriGEO Secretariat at RCMRD and the event organizers for inviting me to participate in this distinguished panel. As a caveat, my intervention is going to be less of a space agency perspective than the perspective of someone who works for a space agency. Nevertheless, if I can put the ask up front in line with the symposium's theme, I'll say that what space agencies want to see is a prosperous and a resilient Africa. We want to see African institutions actively utilizing Earth observations for development, for monitoring, and in support of climate action. But also, space agencies want to collaborate with you, the members of the AfriGEO community, to, as we say in Servier, co-develop solutions with you. And we want to hear from you about how we can collaborate appropriately with you. But I'll take a step back. As pointed out in Yana's and Dr. Venturini's remarks, this symposium is happening on the heels of COP26, which highlighted the importance of EO for climate. And since climate change is broad and cross-cutting, I'll focus on the issue of how land use change contributes to global change. I'll also remind everyone that the IPCC's 5th assessment report found that land use change is responsible for almost a quarter of anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions. And it's therefore recognized that protecting our natural ecosystems is an important part of helping mitigate climate change impacts. So a significant COP26 outcome was the Glasgow Leaders Declaration of Forest and Land Use, signed by 141 countries, including 34 African nations, in which calls on countries to halt deforestation by 2030. That declaration can be seen as a continuation of the work of COP13 in 2007, when the Reducing Emissions from Deforestation and Forest Degradation, REDD+ mechanism, was formally recognized by the Bali Action Plan. To put that into context, when the Servier program that I work for was officially launched by USAID and NASA almost 3 years before the Bali Action Plan, Servier's initial focus was on land cover monitoring, which was something of a novelty at the time. And when I first started working for Servier in 2006, we certainly considered land cover monitoring important, but in those days, there were essentially no teeth behind that. It was really the impetus of REDD+, which provided countries with incentives to monitor their forests, and it also helped to institutionalize such monitoring as a formal part of countries' reporting commitments. That in turn led to GEO, the Group on Earth Observations, forming the Forest Carbon Tracking Task circa 2008, which eventually became the Global Forest Observations Initiative, GFOI. It was also the initiative or the impetus of REDD+, which ultimately led to financing for RCMRD to map land cover across 10 Eastern and Southern African countries to support their national greenhouse gas inventories in the context of severe. And since that work almost 8 years ago, we've seen countries' capacities grow with the support of regional centers of excellence like RCMRD and AgriMet and AfriGEO, as well as CSA and SURGES. And we've also seen demand from countries to meet their reporting requirements under the UNFCCC grow even more sophisticated. And so in support of the Paris Agreement via REDD+, many countries are seeking to be able to generate land cover data sets biannually or even annually. However, it also goes without saying that not only has demand increased, but the supply of Earth observation data has also increased exponentially, with colleagues routinely pointing out that we are really living in a golden age of remote sensing. And so not only do countries now have access to almost 50 years of Landsat data, something that wasn't available 14 years ago when REDD+ came into being, but also, among other things, countries now also have access to, for instance, Copernicus Sentinel-1 radar imagery, which sees through the clouds, but they also have access to high-resolution spatial data from Planet, courtesy of purchase from the government of Norway. In addition to the data, countries also have access to free tools like SNAP and QGIS, and they also have access to cloud computing platforms like Google Earth Engine, Earth on AWS, the Microsoft Planetary Computer, and PanGeo. So the question is, what is holding us back? I'd ask you to think about that, but first, a scientific call to action. There are a number of activities occurring now which are not just relevant to the AfriGEO community, but which would really benefit from the active participation of the AfriGEO community, as echoed by the previous speakers. So, complementary to the activities of GEO, the Committee on Earth Observation Satellites, CEOS, is currently undertaking a significant activity. And as a reminder, CEOS has 34 members, including Nigeria's NASRDA and South Africa's SANSA, and 29 associate members, including Gabon's AGEOS. It has 5 active working groups, including one on capacity development and data democracy, which until recently was chaired by Dr. Nancy Serby of NASA. And so to close, just to say that in conjunction with the UNFCCC, CEOS is currently undertaking a global stocktake activity to be completed in 2023 to strengthen how countries are using EO data in their national reporting processes, as well as their nationally determined contributions to the Paris Agreement. As a part of that stocktake activity, over the next year or so, the space agencies will be reaching out to members of the AfriGEO community to better understand how we can all work together to ensure that EO capacities are strengthened. I'll close by asking that we brainstorm about how we can specifically collaborate together in that context to ensure that we are making the most of the different opportunities. Thank you so much. And back to you, Professor Kabuba.
Thank you so much for that insightful information that you have given us. I think one thing is coming out very clearly, that there is a need for us to co-create, to co-design. And one of the other elements which is also coming up is that land use planning in the end of the day will be very key. So on that note, I would like to invite Shanti to further talk on the Digital Earth Africa initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Amos. I've got 2 slides. Let's see if I can turn them on. Can you see my slide, please, Amos?
I can see your slide, but if you can put on presentation mode so that it will be clearer for everyone.
Yep. All right. Thank you, Amos. I'd like to thank the organizing committee, AfriGEO Symposium, for a fantastic, for organizing this event. And also thanks for inviting us, inviting Digital Earth Africa to this event. I'm told that we have 5 minutes, so I have 2 slides. I'll go through that in the 5 minutes I'm given. So basically I'm summarizing in these 5 minutes. I would like to summarize the outcomes from a deep dive session that we organized on the application of Digital Earth Africa to support climate action in Africa. That session was organized on the 30th of September, very recently, and it was a 3-hour session, obviously, and I will try to summarize in these 5 minutes, which basically the 3 points as you see in the slide. But before I go into this, I'd like to just very briefly mention Digital Earth Africa. Most of you would have probably known or heard or actually signed up to it. It is operational, fully active in Africa, and it offers continental scale products entire Africa. For example, water observation from Africa and cloud-free, what we call geomag mosaics, 10-meter sentinel to mosaics. And we have Landsat data going back to 1980s of all of Africa, or the entire archive from USGS is fully processed and available as analysis-ready data. And also we have Sentinel-1 C-band SAR data. So Sentinel-1, Sentinel-2, Landsat, and also derived products such as the water observation from space. And we have crop extent mapping that's nearly complete for all of Africa. And we're working on the fractional cover products as well as the NDVI anomaly. So I don't have time to go into this, details of Digital Earth Africa, but you can have a look for yourself if you haven't already. I would encourage you to sign up. So the discussion in the deep dive on climate action were really the first thing point there is that session allowed us to bring together a diverse group of experts, updating the participants on the latest research and the work being done on climate change studies in Africa, particularly using Earth observation data sets. We had presenters from UNFCCC talking about the training data sets, talking about greenhouse gas training, particularly for Africa, including the land use, land conversion sector, LULUCF sector, AFLU sector. And we had speakers from World Bank talking about MRV requirements for carbon markets. And of course, RCMRD, Phoebe from RCMRD talked about the work being done from RCMRD. Emil mentioned some of that in his presentation just before. Of course, we have Sylvia from USGS talked about the Silver Carbon program in Africa. And we had colleagues from Australia who are doing work in Botswana and Southern Africa on the savanna fire management, which has significant benefits in reducing the emissions from savanna fires. Of course, we had NASA CEO's work on Climate Cube from Brian Kellogg, who presented his work at that event. And we had a private sector company talking about the integration of different data sets for reporting and action on climate change. And we had about 70 participants, including we targeted the national focal points who report to UNFCCC and also greenhouse gas inventory specialists to prepare these biannual reports. They were the audience. So basically this allowed us to raise the awareness of Digital Earth Africa as a capability, operational capability that's currently available with analysis-ready data sets and services to support climate action in Africa, particularly in relation to those 3 areas noted there, to report the national greenhouse gas inventory and also more MRV as tools more broadly. When I say greenhouse gas inventory reporting, we're talking about AFLU, or what we call LULUCF reporting, mainly land use, land conversion. That's the area. That's an area we, particularly in Australia, we've been using the satellite data. We have a similar system as we call Digital Earth Australia here, which is currently being used the last 5 years for reporting our greenhouse gas inventories from land use sector. And also particularly climate action in relation to mitigation activities, which are well known: deforestation, afforestation, reforestation. There is quite a big domestic market in Australia where we use satellite data extensively, including Sentinel-2 and Landsat. So certainly this data is proven in many countries, and we know it's capable, and it's now available in Africa widely, free of cost, with all the associated tools. And lastly, climate adaptation. I'll have one slide on that in the next one. I'll come to that in a minute. So we talked in that session in all these areas what how we can use the satellite data. We won't have time to go through that in now. And as a follow-up action, my last point being there, that we have, following on the feedback from that session, we have published a paper that which is available on website, and the link is here as well, an empowering country-level action in Africa using Digital Earth Africa as an example. I would encourage you to look up that paper on there. We're also, as a follow-up from that deep dive session, we're working with the World Bank and Geo to trial the next generation MRV tool using Digital Earth Africa as a platform. These are early stage discussions, but we hope we'll get to that. And also, we're also currently following up with NASA, Brian Kellogg from NASA and CEOS, to develop a climate cube to support country-specific action. Again, we can talk about more of that in the discussion. And of course, we're working with implementing partners. We have 6 of them in spread out Africa who have interest in supporting regional action on climate change, and quite a few of them I see is in participants today. So all of these are currently in progress. So that's kind of a very quick takeaway from that event. This slide, I just wanted to show you, most of you would have seen the use of Earth observation for deforestation, reforestation, and afforestation applications. But in adaptation, which is of course less known and more complex area, satellite data is incredibly useful. And the best part is that actually a lot of these tools are available or will be available on Digital Earth Africa. This one is a pilot project we've done in collaboration with CSC partners and using the algorithm developed here in Geoscience Australia as a part of our contribution to CEOS. So these algorithms will be made available and anyone can access in Africa. What's incredible there is, as you can see, the coastal changes from 2000 really to 2020. In the last 20 years, you can see the erosion, and you can see the houses over there that are subject to that risk of this of the coastal erosion. And everybody would have seen, those who have attended the session 1, where Professor Francois talked about all those the impact of climate change, and some of those graphs are very scary looking, but in reality these changes are happening in front of our eyes, and you can see them through the satellite data. And we have assembled these 50 years of data, and you can see that. And this particular example is really an eye-opener to me, really, to show how the Landsat data can be used to map the coastal changes anywhere in Africa now. And yeah, so it's just the power of the satellite data. So I just wanted to leave that point there. These applications are real, they're quantifiable, they're measurable, and we can monitor these coastlines anywhere in Africa now. So I'll stop there. Back to you, Chair. I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, and for first of all, for highlighting some important things like the fact that capacity building is key, or capacity development is key in sustaining all these initiatives that we talk about, and also the fact that coastal monitoring is becoming a very, very key issue in Africa, and I'm happy that you were able to touch base on that. So we will now go to Yvonne. Yvonne, if you are ready, can you give us your talk on this?
Yeah, thank you very much. And to all the panelists, very interesting conversation happening already. As mentioned, I'm Yvonne Yokabi. I work with UNDP, have been supporting the government of Kenya in implementation of its various climate change policies. And in particular, I coordinated the development of Kenya's third greenhouse gas inventory. And it's currently supporting the verification system. And it is in this frame that I wish to make a submission that Earth observations are very critical, as has been mentioned, for the evidence-based policy-making process. And in the frame of Kenya, we have experiences that have shown the importance of these Earth observations because they have been critical in enabling the country to provide critical evidence that is supporting its policy making. For instance, the country has been one of the first countries to submit its updated NDC, its nationally determined contribution. They did this in 2020, and that process required Earth observations to provide the critical evidence, more so in the forestry and land use sector. The updated nationally determined contribution for Kenya makes a commitment to reduce emissions by 32% against a business as usual scenario of 143 million tons. That's about 42.6 million tons. Of this, the forestry and land use sector will contribute about 11.9 million tons. So you can already see the importance of the forestry and land use sector in allowing the country to achieve its commitments and its ambitions. And the forestry and land use sector critically relies on Earth observations. One, for baseline setting, and two, for monitoring of progress that is being made. And so the Earth observations have been critical in providing critical information on areas of intervention that allow, finance to be allocated, that allow action to be prioritized. And so that has been one of the experiences in Kenya. The other area that I want to highlight is Kenya is also a signatory to the Sendai framework on disaster reduction. And for disaster preparedness, Earth observations play a very critical role. And so it's my appeal to this forum to see how we can continue to support Kenya and other African governments to be able to manage their disasters better through providing critical evidence and information that can inform action, early interventions for disaster preparedness. In the last submission I want to make here is that the greenhouse gas inventories and after having come from the COP26, we continue to place a lot of emphasis on the need for transparency. And transparency will only be informed by data. And these Earth observations are allowing us to have robust greenhouse gas inventories that allow the countries to then be able to participate in the global discourse on climate change, but also for action planning. And so it continues to be very important that the Earth observations are be made, and so that we can have robust greenhouse gas inventories. In Kenya, we have seen that for us, we have a potential of reducing emissions in the forestry and land use sector of up to 20.3 million tons. And so this can only come from data that we get from satellite imagery and other processes that happen in the Earth observation space. And so for us to have sustainable development in the country, make sure that we meet those sustainable development goals, it has been critical to see the role of science and data in the policy making process. And this has been something that Kenya attests to having benefited from these processes that have been happening in the country. So with that, I wish to hand over back to our moderator. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You have raised a very important issue. So how can, within Africa, how can science, data, and more importantly, Earth observation data come in to play a role in helping us make the informed decisions that we need to make to knock out poverty out of Africa? I think this is where we want to go. How the science plus the Earth observations can help us to inform policy to remove poverty from Africa. So on that note, I call on Professor Chris to give us his presentation. He will have a number of case studies that he wants to highlight some of these efforts. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And sort of, following up, Professor, on your question about how can we use Earth observations to knock out or knock down poverty. One of the ways that we can do that is to support more effective early warning of droughts and other extremes like temperatures. And so to that end, I'm going to briefly describe some of our Climate Hazard Center Earth observation products, and then show some examples of how they can be used to do climate change analyses and early warning. And the backbone of the data products that are put out by the Climate Hazard Center, and these products are supported by the Famine Early Warning System Network and NASA. And we use long archives of medium resolution, about 0.05 degree geostationary satellite thermal infrared observations. And basically, if you're looking down at the Earth from a geostationary satellite, you're either going to be, for the most part, looking at the Earth's surface, and we can use that to derive our climate hazards infrared temperature with stations product, or you'll be looking at clouds, and from that you can get precipitation estimates. And so these are really good products for looking at both weather extremes and climate change in Africa, because they perform reasonably well in places where you don't have weather observations, which is a lot of Africa. And they also give you a pretty long period of record going back to the early 1980s. So that combination is quite powerful. So some of the things we're going to briefly talk about are more frequent dry Eastern East African long rains, higher evaporative demand during droughts, more extreme air temperatures, more extreme La Nina and El Nino events, and then predictable droughts. These are all ways that climate change is already impacting sub-Saharan Africa, but they're also things that we can try to monitor and predict, improving our early warning systems. So there's a couple of papers there that are freely available in Frontiers in Climate. And the map on the left is showing the change in the long range. This is the kind of March, April, May season in Eastern East Africa, which has seen a pretty precipitous decline from the 1980s and 90s, where we had about 3 dry seasons, to this kind of post-1998 era where we get droughts almost every other year. And so this is one, very concerning component of climate change that's unfortunately impacting Eastern East Africa as we speak. And we also see a strong connection. This is showing regression slopes. There's a strong connection between growing season precipitation and reverse events of evapotranspiration or atmospheric water demand. And this is especially strong in dry areas. And what we see is that in recent droughts, the atmosphere is absorbing more water. So it's exacerbating precipitation deficits. We also see more extreme air temperatures. So this is a project that I'm working on right now, where we're taking our CHERTS data and projecting it into the future using CMIP6 data. So we have counts of the number of days greater than 30 degrees Celsius. This is for January. We have a projection of that for 2050. We can look at the difference. And I kind of like to do changes like this, where, this is a 2050 world if we don't abate our emissions. And you can see that there's a lot of places that are going to be really, really in trouble due to extreme temperatures. We have a paper that just came out in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, looking at heat exposure, and it's very rapidly going up when you use our data set. 30 billion person years in 1983, up to almost 100 now. So that's about a tripling in period of record. If we look at this is just for urban areas, but you can see that there's a lot of urban areas in Africa that have seen big increases in heat exposure. We're also seeing more extreme La Nina and El Nino events. So, some people think about climate change is this sort of like bathtub warming of the ocean and atmosphere where everything's kind of warming slowly at the same rate. And that's not a very effective model of climate change. What we really see is more extreme sea surface temperatures, air temperatures. And in the context of El Ninos, which tend to be associated with warm waters in the Eastern Pacific, or La Ninas, which are associated with warm water in the Western Pacific, those warm areas are becoming warmer, creating greater hazards. And in support of the Famine Early Warning System Network, we do a lot of work using those insights to guide predictions. And so this is just a slide that I'll be discussing later today with my East African friends and colleagues, Gideon Galoo and Chris Chateau, Doriba Karicha, as part of the FuseNet process, where we're anticipating yet another drought in March, April, May of 2022. So if you take Eastern East Africa, dry, long, rainy seasons, and just look at the sea surface temperatures during those events, you see that they have really warm waters here in the Western Pacific, cool La Nina-like waters here in the Eastern Pacific. When we look at the forecast for March, April, May of next year, then unfortunately resembles that strongly. When we look at the predictions of this Western V gradient between the Eastern and the Western Pacific, we see, unfortunately, 2022 is predicted to be a lot like 2021, which was a dry year. And so when we just look at the number of dry seasons associated with these types of forecasts, we find a preponderance of dry East African rains. And so this is an example of early warning where we're expecting a drought next year, and we're using our insights about climate change to help inform that. And so unfortunately, we use these kind of insights to make predictions of drought for East Africa and the OND 2020 season. We did that again. And for the March, April, May of 2021, and then the OND of 2021, we made forecasts this summer. And so we're using these insights about sea surface temperatures to make long range predictions. And really scarily, we may be looking at 4 back-to-back droughts. So this is basically the conclusion, is that early warning systems depend on search patterns. And how we think about climate change is an important part of developing appropriate search patterns. We need to watch out for the drought-inducing influence of extremely warm sea surface temperatures. We need to watch out for the desiccating impacts of exceptionally warm air temperatures. And Earth observations will be a vital line of defense. The Climate Hazard Center is constantly developing data sets and forecasts to that end. We love sharing these with our colleagues in Africa, so please visit our website. I have a recent book, Drought, Flood, Fire, How Climate Change Contributes to Catastrophes, that kind of provides a comprehensive overview of recent weather and climate extremes, and you might be interested in that. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much too. You have highlighted the fact that we have to find ways to live with disasters. Disasters will always be with us. And in Africa, I think another thing which is important to highlight is that when disaster occurs, we have majority of the population are vulnerable. And I think that is why it is the work you are doing at your center is very vital for us as a continent to see how come we can have these early warning systems to further guide our government in how they do their urban planning, where people need to settle and all that. This is really very, very important. So thank you very much, Prof. Chris, for your presentation. So now we have the last presenter. Mr. Moni, are you ready, please?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much. Let me
Please
just
share with us.
Can you see my presentation?
Yes, I can see your presentation, please.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much for this opportunity. So my name is Mr. Moderator. I'm from the South African Weather Service. So you all know that the South African Weather Service is the authoritative voice of weather, climate, as well as air quality forecasting in South Africa. So today I'm just going to present the role of Earth observations to support early warning systems for extreme weather events. So we've all seen previous talks stating that the IPCC report confirms that human influence has warmed the atmosphere, ocean and land quite considerably. And this is also affecting the climate extremes in every region across the globe. And of course, observations provides also evidence that extreme weather events such as heavy rainfall, tropical cyclones, droughts, etc., are becoming the new norm for us. And it is also predicted to become more severe going into the future. So strategies and actions are required so that we can adapt and mitigate the risks of a changing climate. And then also we need to support the United Nations sustainability goals, in particular number 13, which is climate action. But of course, all the sustainability goals are interlinked, and it's also addressing one will also assist with all of the other climate sustainability goals. So one key component we also need to achieve is to develop and improve our existing early warning systems and develop new ones. And this is also especially true for the African continent, where there are still many challenges that remain in our early warning systems. So, of course, we need early warning systems across all timescales, ranging from nowcasting all the way to climate change. So at the South African Weather Service, we are covering all of these timescales and looking into all of them. And this is to adapt and mitigate the risks of a changing climate. So we try to support all of these timescales going into the future. And of course, observations, models, as well as various tools form an essential part of these early warning systems. And then, of course, in Africa, which is a data sparse region, Earth observations as a satellites, of course, plays a very important role. So I'm going to focus just on some case studies on the nowcasting and very short range forecasting scale and the benefits of satellite today. So this is the area that I'm working in, which is the nowcasting and very short range forecasting scale. So just to give a brief discussion, so the very short range forecasting time scale is usually the first 2 to 12 hour scale of events occurring. And so this is also usually the first time scale forecasters will focus their attention on if they need to forecast thunderstorms. And this is usually used to assess the pre-storm environment and to identify areas where possible extreme weather events is likely to occur. And of course, satellite in combination with numerical weather prediction is often used to get an area where forecasters can focus their attention for the development of these events. So there are many products that we use from satellite. We use specifically the UNITSat, Meteosat second generation satellite. And we look at various things in this time scale. So one of them is, an example is moisture boundaries, where we can use brightness temperature differences to identify moisture boundaries and dry lines. So the image on the left is just an example where we take the different temperature difference and then we can determine moist and dry areas. And then if you look at the image on the right, you can see that 4 hours after this image, a lot of thunderstorms developed in this region. So this definitely assists forecasters to get an early view of where thunderstorm development might occur. We also have a lot of instability indices that we use. So this is to assess how unstable the atmosphere is and what the likelihood of convection will be. So there are many different instability indices available to forecasters. And this is usually used to replace radio zondes or upper air sense that is, of course, very limited over the continent. So we use satellite-derived indices to estimate these things. And this is just an example showing a high K-index value in this specific region. And then 6 hours later on, you can see that thunderstorms actually did occur in this region. So also provides a very good lead time of thunderstorm prediction. We also combine all these instability indices as well as moisture products, as well as lift into a single product that is a probability-based map, where we early in the morning provide the probability of areas where thunderstorms might develop. And as you can see, 47 hours later on, thunderstorms actually did develop in this area where the probabilities were high for thunderstorm development. Then, of course, we also focus on the nowcasting scale, which is your 0 to 2 hour forecasting scale. And of course, observations play a very important role in this area. And we use this to, or satellites to identify and monitor thunderstorms. We also use it to track thunderstorms, so the core of thunderstorm cells, to analyze the different thunderstorms, and also to nowcast the expected movement up to 2 hours in advance. So this is just to show some examples of what we do. We take single channels and then we color enhance it to give a better on the picture of what's happening in the more severe areas of thunderstorms. We can also look at certain cloud features such as cold UV and cold ring shade storms. So here's an example of a storm over South Africa that produced very large hail, and you can see the damage there. So this assists us quite a bit. And then we also have RGB combinations of different channels. So this is to identify the severe parts of thunderstorms, also to look at things like overshooting tops, where you have your strong updrafts. So this assists us greatly in thunderstorm nowcasting. Then we also make use of a product from the nowcasting satellite application facilities, where we track thunderstorms. So this is with the rapidly developing thunderstorm product. So as you have all probably seen with radar, we usually track the cause of thunderstorms. So this RDT product offers a similar approach, where we identify the intense part of thunderstorms and also the direction of movement. And here's just a case study of a severe thunderstorm that produced large hail and a tornado in South Africa. And this is the radar image on the left. And as you can see, this product also tracked that same storm. And even showed that the movement was to the left of the normal flow of thunderstorms, which is typically indicative of severe supercell thunderstorms. Then, of course, we also analyze storms, so we can determine things like the storm characteristics, such as speed, movement, rainfall estimates, hail estimates, and so forth. So here's just an example of tropical cyclone Idai, where we looked at the convective rainfall rate product from the nowcasting SAF software. And you can, of course, see the intense rainfall in this system. And then we can also get, we're looking into hail algorithms to use satellite to identify hail thunderstorms. So here were a couple of hailstorms, and then the product that we're developing then shows the corresponding probability of hail that we predicted. And then, of course, there's also the nowcasting part, where we determine the expected movement and location of thunderstorms in the next hour or so. So here's an example of an intense thunderstorm yesterday approaching the Kruger National Park. So you can see it was a quite intense storm. And then we also track the storm, the current location, and the expected movement in the next hour or so. And then, of course, here's also an example of how we can extrapolate rainfall estimates ahead in time with the nowcasting SAF software. So this was the observed rainfall And then this was the nowcast for the next 90 minutes. And if you look at the actual observed rainfall 90 minutes later, you can see that there's a fairly good agreement between the nowcast as well as the observation. And then, of course, various observation and products and tools are essential to feed into all the early warning systems that we supply to clients. And of course, we need to develop or enhance the existing systems so that various sectors can become resilient to climate extremes. So international collaboration on projects is also an excellent way to achieve this. So one example is the Rain for Africa project, which was funded by the Dutch government and the European Space Agency that we completed recently, where we provided 125,000 small-scale farmers in Africa with weather information to improve their agricultural yields by more than 10% and to lower their costs by at least 10%. So Earth observations, of course, played a great role in this project. And this is just an example of the type of rainfall maps that they can, gridded rainfall maps that they can view on a website as well as on an app that was provided to them. So just to conclude, extreme weather events are of course increasing, and so we need effective early warning systems to adapt and mitigate the risks, as well as to support the sustainability goals. And of course, Earth observations play a critical role in these systems. And of course, collaborations and partnerships between government institutions and the private sector is very important so that we can meet these development challenges in Africa. Thank you very much. That's my talk.
Thank you very much for the case study you have given. It shows the importance of the linkages, especially with supporting food security. I think that is very, very important. Supporting the agriculture sector is really key and important for Africa. I think now we will, I want to start with the discussion. So first there's one question which is also very important. In fact, it was a question which was asked in the chat, which I want to start with, because I think is an important question that we need to look at. In fact, there are two questions now. So one of the questions is that this was directed to Yvonne, that why is it that the government of Kenya is still using the toxic chemical NPK for crop agriculture? But let me also add that this is a challenge for most countries in Africa. I can say the case of Ghana, whereby the use of chemical fertilizer is still on the rise, but it is not really in effect giving us the needed yields that we need. It means that there is a missing gap, and maybe that is where Earth observation needs to come in to help us to precisely know what are the good lands that we need to use. But let me get Yvonne, can you try to comment on this, please?
Thank you very much. Please, could you repeat the question? I'm sorry about that.
So the question is, why is Kenya not willing to ban the toxic chemical NPK fertilizer for agriculture sector?
Yeah, no, unfortunately, I'm not in a position. I only do monitoring, reporting, and verification. On matters fertilizer, I'm not able to comment. Thank you. Okay, but I just want, if the attendee is still watching, yeah, this is a general case in Africa, because the governments are still importing a lot of chemical fertilizer. But the point is that there needs to be a way by which Earth observations can come in to really help farmers to identify which soils or which lands are the best for which type of crop. I think this is very important going forward. But I think Professor Chris wants to intervene on this.
Yes. Thank you, Amos. And And you know, I can't really speak to fertilizer use per se, but you know, and Mark kind of mentioned similar applications that he's worked with, supporting, you know, farmer level decision making. And you know, we have downscaled weather forecasts that were supported by Severe that farmers can use to answer questions about, you know, when to plant and when to apply fertilizers. And so at least, you know, by using earth observations effectively, you know, you can make sure that if you're using fertilizer, that you're using it efficiently and at the right time. And I think that there's a lot of opportunities, you know, for improved farmer decision making at both climate and weather timescales that earth observations can really assist with.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yes, so there is good. We are getting a number of questions, which is very good. We have a question going to Moni, and the question is, were you able to predict the formation of pyrocumulonimbus clouds driven by severe wildfires? Any comment on that, Moni?
By severe wildfires?
Yes, please.
Can you just repeat the question? I'm not sure I'm understanding correctly.
Yeah, I'm also trying to get what the person said. Were you able to predict the formation of pyrocumulonimbus clouds driven by severe wildfires? And it further says that this phenomenon causes very dangerous conditions for fire suppression personnel, yeah, something like that.
So I'm not sure in terms of wildfires, but I'm assuming she's speaking about weather forecasts.
Okay.
Yeah, so we do severe weather forecasts up to about, like I've mentioned just now, 2 hours ahead in time. So of course, as the lead time increases, the accuracy becomes lower. But as I indicated, we have the very short range forecasting tools where we identify areas of potential severe weather that can occur. And then of course, as we get closer to the event, we use nowcasting to, once the storm has developed, we use nowcasting techniques to track and monitor the movement of thunderstorms. So with satellite, it's quite difficult to forecast if severe thunderstorms will develop, but there is tools available that assist us to get an estimate of whether certain areas will indeed develop severe weather. So we look at instability as well as moisture in the atmosphere, as well as triggering mechanisms, and this can give us a good indication.
Thank you very much. There is just a follow-up question to that. And it says that what type of rainfall observation did you use in the Rain for Africa project?
Yeah, so we used the convective rainfall rate product from the nowcasting satellite application facility software. So it's called the convective rainfall rate. And this specific rainfall is more suitable for convective rainfall events, so associated with thunderstorms, but it's not so good with stratiform rainfall. So we also combined it with stratiform rainfall estimates from, or forecasts from the models that we run at the Weather Service to try and improve that part as well. So that formed the primary rainfall field. But then over South Africa, we also have our various stations, so our automatic weather stations that we included. And we also, over South Africa, where we have radar, we also include rainfall estimates. But for other African countries, we mainly focused on the satellite-derived rainfall.
Okay, thank you very much. I will take one last question from the attendees, and that question is going to Sarah. And it says, do you have suggestions on how to engage with African countries who are not yet GEO members? And how can such countries become engaged with the GEO work program or the AfriGEO?
Right, that's a great question, and essentially that's what we're also trying to do more and more within the Geo Secretariat. First of all, we have a number of partners in Africa and initiatives that are operating in the whole continent, like Digital Earth Africa and others, who are already covering a number of countries who are not necessarily already members of GEO. So that's one thing. You can directly go to the partners and work with them. But of course, being member of GEO is helpful because you have access to the full set of capabilities and support from the Geo Secretariat in terms of engaging in the policy processes. So for instance, for next year, when we have the COP27 in Egypt, it would be great if we could prepare together to bring forward the priorities of African countries in GEO, to have a single messaging from the African continent with regard to Earth observation, especially in the negotiations, and how to become a member of GEO is essentially write me an email and I'll help you with that. I'm happy to also say that we at COP in Glasgow, we also had an opportunity to talk to many potential members in Africa, including DRC and others. And we have recently welcomed a new partner called the Coalition for Rainforest Nation. That is an alliance of countries all around the world, but specifically focusing on deforestation and the REDD+ mechanism in the negotiations, and that collects many countries in Africa. So the representation is there already. It's just that we need to have more, let's say, boots on the ground for GEO in Africa.
Thank you very much. And to further add that to join GEO is as simple as just going to the website and dropping an email, and all the other protocols will follow. And from the chat, there are a lot of useful links that is already from the GEO, and also from Digital Earth Africa, and also from there is also SEOs also have some tools and networks which are also there. So there's quite a lot. You can go in there, get some materials. The contacts are within some of these materials, so you can write to them directly. And if there is anything, they can further come back to you. Now, I have some general questions because, you know, one, being an African, and two, the fact that all these big initiatives talk like it's all well and good, but it is also important we also discuss the critical issue about data. So this one is an open question to the panelists. You can jump in as you wish. So what are the data gaps in your experiences in a way limiting the commitment or the goals we want to achieve by the use of Earth observation for the continent to support sustainable development goals or even to support climate action? This is an open question, and I would like each member to at least comment on this. Starting with Emil, please.
Yeah, thank you so much, Professor Kabuba. So in terms of your question of, you know, what are the gaps in terms of data, just following on my remarks, from the perspective of at least, you know, how land cover data support climate action, one could argue that the data itself isn't a gap, and actually, you know, one might argue instead that the gap perhaps is the capacity to apply the existing data. And so, you know, as Shanti showed with, you know, the work that they're doing with Digital Earth Africa, as Sarah showed in terms of all that GEO is doing with the GEO work program, it seems, you know, at least when we look at, you know, what the situation was 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. Now there is so much data out there. And so the challenge seems to be more of how, representatives from different countries, how we as a community, how we put that all to use. And of course, there are different resources out there, as you heard from Shanti about Digital Earth Africa, different things that I didn't get to fit in my remarks. On the NASA side, we have a program called RSET, which provides remote training opportunities, et cetera. There's the work of the EOTech DevNet network, which unites GEOs, capacity development working group with CSWG CapD, et cetera. And so, and also, another gap that people might say, well, what about tools? It seems also that there's, ready availability of tools. And so I would argue that perhaps, the part that we need to work more on is how we apply what's there. And I'll pass it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So you have stressed that maybe the issue is about capacity. The capacity is one of the things that we need to look at. But I also want, as others come in, to look at if we think that capacity is an issue, to build capacity is like in several forms. How do we tackle it? If, for example, I take a country like Kenya, and they want to tackle an issue of building capacity in the forestry section in order for them to use Earth observations to further monitor and report accurately. Because I also feel that sometimes African countries, maybe the people are not able to record precisely what is really there. So it could be that they are underestimating or they are overestimating because of the things. But we need to look at, is it institutional capacities that we need to work on, or is it individual capacities that we need to look at? Would someone like to jump in to comment on this? I think Shanti seems to be.
Sure. Thank you, Amos. Yeah, look, I'd like to add a couple of points. That's a good point about both are relevant. I think both individual and institutional, they go hand in hand. And I'd like to also add to the, Emil pointed out very good points about the data. I think my own experience, right? I've been working in climate change, greenhouse gas reporting from Australia to UNFCCC last 12 years, is that there's always plenty of data, right? And sometimes you have data gaps, but there is always solutions. Like those of you who work in the reporting to UNFCCC, particularly IPCC guidelines, there's a range. If you have no data, you start with tier 1, and then you got tier 2, and then you got tier 3. You can go into more complex and build more complex systems as you advance and learn. So my suggestion to data is that never wait for, that one day you're going to have every data and then you're going to build system. You start what you got. And as the data gets better, with time, we know data gets better. And you replace the old data, we put in new data, and you continue to report. And we always, those of you, again, do the reporting on greenhouse gas inventories. We always, when you get new data, we revise the data, time series data, back to baselines, right? Back to 1990, and we report again new series. So that's a way, I think that's a good example, the practice under the IPCC and also UNFCCC reporting. They're very good practice in terms of use what's available, global data sets. If you don't have local data, use that. Global data sets, but when with the time and with the satellite data, you're able to produce better quality data for your country specific, then replace the global data with the country specific. And your point about, I think the capacity is an important one, and we recognize, and also the funding, right? A lot of countries, particularly in Africa, is you have technology capacity, but there's also the capacity is also comes to not only just human capacity, but also financial capacity to be able to do this, both at institutional level, particularly at institutional level. So I'll stop there. Hopefully that adds to the discussion. Thank you, Amos.
And really, thank you. And before Yvonne comes in, I also want to believe that you've mentioned something which is also very important, which maybe the AfriGEO will need to look at that. The financial capacity is also very important. We live in Africa, and we from Africa know that our government can do it if they prioritize. The resources are there. It's just that sometimes it is not tackled or is not anchored on the areas that needs to be done. How can the Earth observations, the AfriGEO, and we here suggest by way by which we can use Earth observations to further improve governance in a way and enable that financial capacity that we need to sustain this? Yvonne, your comment, please.
No, yeah, very exciting. I think I agree. You know, capacity has been a real issue. And in our experience, what we found is we built individual capacity. And that individual then gets stretched because they have this capacity that is required by very many other organizations that are looking for that unique capacity. So building a critical mass of that individual capacity within the country and also institutional capacity is very critical. So for our experience, we found that I actually sum up the issues as 3 C's: capacity, capacity, but also institutional capacity. And institutional capacity means also ensuring that they have the technology that is up to date to do accurate observations. And that is very important. I think in terms of funding prioritization, indeed, that is something that we have observed, that the institutions that are mandated with the collection of this data find themselves relying a lot on donor funding. So if the donor funding is not existent, then in a sense, you don't find them having that funding capacity internally to be able to do the accurate observations continuously. And so what you find is there's lack of prioritization, but I think also lack of prioritization can be tackled because, policymakers look for this data in a manner that is digestible. And what we find is that these observations sometimes are so cryptic to understand that in many cases we are told, break it down. Just break it down for us so that we can be able to understand why is it critical for us. And so I see a lot of opportunities to collaborate in communication, popular communication messages of this critical information that we gather, this critical data that is gathered. For example, here in Kenya, one of the collaborations is with our statistics body, for example. Every year they remove an economic survey report, but you find very little is said about Earth observations and what they mean for the economy. You only find that there's very generic statements in there. And so, how are we collaborating with even the institutions that exist, like NASA, Regional Center for Remote Sensing, all these other organizations that are doing wonderful work out there to co-create and also develop products that are palatable for policymakers. I think that is also another issue that African governments could easily address and could see prioritization of Earth observations. Thank you.
Thank you, Yvonne, but I have to come back to you because there is a comment because some of us did not hear well the 3 C's because I think the line break along the way. So if you could repeat, there is one, you have to repeat the 3 C's because we want to take home that because that's very important for us. And two, which I want you to emphasize for us is that how can countries in Africa improve their turnaround reporting requirements for reporting to the UN bodies? Because I think this is also a challenge for a lot of them because they are not able to report on time. So what is the way forward? I think this is a comment that we need to check. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so the 3 C's, I was saying capacity, which we talked about, individual and institutional, cost, which brings around the funding element. The Earth observations are a very expensive exercise. We have funded those that type of work, and it's a lot. It's a lot of money that organizations don't have prioritized, and so they rely heavily on donor funding. And the last C for me was collaboration. Collaboration, not just with other scientific organizations, but also with popular messaging entities, so communication experts, so that we can break it down. Science is difficult to understand. Policymakers get bored. We literally have been told this is boring information. And so, they're looking to have something that they can easily break down and understand. And so for me, those are the 3 C's. Second question pertaining to how can we have a faster turnaround in the development of our inventories and reporting. I think Shanti broke it down very well. Let's just do what we can now. IPCC gives for room for improvement of inventories and reporting over time. They understand that African countries don't have the funding required, may not have the funding required for reporting. And so they allow us to do improvements over time. But what it takes is for us to start somewhere and get that data out there. Accuracies can be improved over time. Of course, we make the ambition to be as accurate as possible, but accuracies can be improved over time. For Kenya, how we did it is doing a learning by doing approach. That helped us get it right. So as we were training them on how to translate the data into, to formats that are acceptable to IPCC, they were still collecting the data. The system, the cog was still rolling. And so that allows us to have a quick turnaround in time. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. I think this session needed more time because the discussion is very important and and I see that quite a lot of comments are coming in, which we need to try and address. So right now, I will go to Sarah to make her contribution. After that, Chris will also come. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Amos. In terms of the gap in finance needed in Africa, especially for adaptation to climate change, I wanted to stress the fact that Earth observation are being increasingly used in funding proposals for adaptation and mitigation projects by developing countries as a critical element to strengthen the rationale of those projects, the evidence base of those projects that can then demonstrate that they are strong enough to receive the funding from the Green Climate Fund or other big funds, especially for developing countries. And when the project is approved, Earth observation are also critical to provide data for monitoring and evaluation of the success of the project and the measures implemented, which is, of course, another component that funders are especially interested to, secure and strengthen. So I think we need to work on this front as well, in addition to all the other fronts that were mentioned before, capacity development and data. And Geo is ready to engage with new partners from the sustainable finance sector to do so.
Yeah, thank you very much. There is one comment which I will, because I want to treat it as a very important comment that we need to look at, because there's a question from that how can we be more specific about capacity gap, and whose capacity is to take what decision, and what action is higher priority now? So I think it's something that we have been working on. In fact, the AfriGEO have been trying to do even a survey. I hope some of those results will come along in one of the sections to look at what if it's Earth observations, if we are ranking them, land use, land cover, climate, water resources, which one do we want to anchor on to really make a decision? So, but let me allow Chris to come in with his comment, and from there we can go. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amos. Yeah, and I think I can also, just talk about what I see as one great opportunity for capacity building, which is kind of building capacity, which I think AfriGEO does in a wonderful way, which is building capacity, at the intersection of communities of practice. So there are, experts at climate forecasting, at Earth observations. There are experts who are really good at, analyzing weather data and making ag advisories. There are experts, who are really great at community outreach. And so, one place, if we could, there's a lot of expertise in Africa. And if we could just kind of build a little bit more expertise to let these communities talk to each other, then we can really, promote the effective use of Earth observations. And to kind of go back to Yvonne's 3 C's, so I think a little bit of capacity building where we learn how to talk to each other effectively, I think can be very cost effective. And it can also promote, the cost effective use of lots of resources that are already there. So just kind of, one example is that, here in Santa Barbara, we're producing our CHIRPS rainfall data set. We're producing our high resolution CHIRPS compatible weather forecasts. And, if you know how to get them, they're accessible everywhere in Africa for free. And we're working with some partners at Plant Village at Pennsylvania State University that are pulling from those resources, working with the Kenya Met Department and a group called Shamba Shape Up to send out, SMS messages to 400,000 plus lead farmers in Kenya, helping them to guide their agricultural practices, going out to like 9 million Kenyans via television. And so, and that's all relatively inexpensive. And it would be impossible by any one of those individual groups, but by working together, we can achieve, much more than any of us could do alone, which is why AfriGEO is so awesome. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Before I bring in Shanti, I think there is a lot of interactive comments coming in that is showing that there is that everything we are saying here is making impact somewhere. It is not possible for us to interact in person that would have seen the live inside the room or the conference room. But one thing you have mentioned, which I wanted to really anchor on, is that capacity, when we talk about it, is that in Africa, there is some level of expertise. The gap is just that, how do they talk to each other? How do, for example, Regional Center for Mapping for Resources for Development communicate with maybe another agreement in West Africa or OSS in North Africa, so that because different regional bodies, different capacities, different expertise, but how do we nurture that? Another thing which is also coming up is that we have to find a way to communicate, just as Yvonne said, these complex maps. How do they make sense before the politicians who have to put the money there to sustain our efforts? And it is on that note, I would like Shanti to give the example from the Digital Earth Africa. That is, in a way, at least I happened to be in one of the meetings and I could see that our Minister for Lands and Natural Resources was excited, and he's really trying to push ahead because he feels that there's a need for government to start to put in some financial resources to sustain this initiative in Ghana. Shanti, over to you.
Thank you, Amos. I think one of the important things the big we here, the Earth observation community, I think we need to be mindful is that while we can produce maps and we can produce products, I think what we need is to gain the confidence of the policy people or decision makers, right? Like, for example, in Ghana, often either minister or his delegates who make decisions about very critical issues, right? Where do we build dam, or what action we take about coastal erosion, or all of these important decisions. And I think what we need is gain the confidence of those people by producing quality, fit for purpose products. Just to give you an example, and this is a point I think Nancy is also coming, the comment about the very good question there, you know, about the whose capacity and what decision, what actions are we the priority. So by having, you know, one of the examples is, for example, you have 10 different land cover products from Earth observation, and the question comes is, you know, decision makers, policy people don't have that expertise, don't know that, right? What product to use. This is where the subject matter experts comes in, and people like you, for example, Amos, you know, you will know in Ghana what product to use, right? You will look at the 10 products and say, for that question, Minister, this is the product you must be using because of these reasons. So it's a country expertise. The people in each country, you know, in Kenya, Ewan would look at those products and say, you know, this product from water observation from Vigilant Africa or any other source, you know, there are multiple products. They will be able to make those experts in the country. Actually, you need that. And there's also further work is needed before they goes to decision makers. So it is very, very important. Amos, this is a point I would like to emphasize, is that whether any product, including Vigilant Africa or so many different sources, it's that they need to go through further work. Even our water observations, you cannot just put it in front of minister. You need to make that, you know, take that and do further work to be able to actually go to the minister and say, this is the decisions, you know, here is the data, here is the evidence, here is a model that we put into, and here is the checking we've done, and this works. And so that level work is very critical. And that's, I think, is the way we need to focus as the observation community to actually make this product more sensible, to go all the way to see that impact. And we know that's happening, and we need to do more in that space. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You have landed on a point which I just want us to, I think our time is almost up, but I would really like Sarah to comment on that, because you see, there is a need for us to have a systematic system that everybody can trust. And I think Geo has been working on a certain knowledge hub that they hope to help us to be able to have a federated system that we can be able to use in trying to address if it's an issue of climate action and things like that. Thank you.
Yes, it's a big question, how Earth observation can really support the implementation of the Paris Agreement. Like I said, Earth observation are really recognized at the foundation of the convention and then the Paris Agreement as well. So they are embedded in the process. And in practice, the role of Earth observation for mitigation is to help monitor and detect greenhouse gases, to build national greenhouse gas inventories, and then to bring these assessments at the aggregate level to the global stocktake, which is the ambition mechanism that is foreseen under the Paris Agreement, where every 5 years the countries get together again and raise their targets to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And on the adaptation side, like I said, it's important to again develop indicators to assess impacts and vulnerabilities of climate, but also to monitor the implementation of adaptation measures. And again, this is part of the reporting under the Paris Agreement and the global stocktake. Importantly, there is a lack of global indicators for adaptation, which is not easy to measure. Of course, adaptation is somewhat local because it depends on the particular circumstances of a country or of a population, but there is a need to measure progress collectively made by countries to implement adaptation and then improve resilience to climate change. So there's a lot to do.
Thank you very much, Sarah. There is a lot to do. I think that is where we want to end. There's a lot to do. But the point is that we have to start with the data, with the tools that are already available. And as we go along, if there are newer tools better, we go and recheck again and move on. I think this is where we are emphasizing on. So today has been a very interesting session. I think there are still a lot of things we could do, but because of time, I just want to summarize by saying that there are a lot of tools that are there to help us when it comes to using Earth observations to support climate action for the various countries. But the thing is that we need to leverage the existing capacities from within the continent to address the issues in the continent. I think that is very, very, very important. And AfriGEO is already doing a lot and trying to bring us together. This is a starting point. We are talking together, and I hope that just as we are putting our contacts for everyone to further write to us. So the contacts are being shared. Please write to us, ask any question, so that if there is further deeper things that we need to do, because this is part of the collaboration that we want to do. So AfriGEO Symposium is still continuing tomorrow. So do remember to log in at 1 p.m. ENT tomorrow. And I really want to thank all the panelists. I'm humbled to be your moderator for today. It has been a very exciting one. And we hope that tomorrow we meet again, 1 p.m. ENT. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Thank you all. Great session.
Thank you
Amos. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye, everyone.